Today we are going to be doing one of my favorite canning projects and one of the easiest of all canning projects to do, and that is canning beans. We're going to can 4 different kinds of beans today: kidney beans, pinto beans, adzuki beans, which are a bean that I have not canned before, and black beans. If you are new here, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch, and if you've been here before, welcome back to my kitchen. Now you might be asking yourself, what is the purpose of canning beans if I can just keep dried beans on my shelf and cook them up in my Instant Pot? There's 2 reasons why I personally like to can my beans and like to can them in the way that I'm going to show you today. The first is just the convenience of it. I love being able to go down to my pantry, grab a can of beans off the shelf, rinse them off, and throw them right into whatever recipe I am making. So that's definitely the first reason. The second reason is that beans have complex carbohydrates in them that some of us human beings cannot digest well, most of us as a matter of fact, and they end up nestling themselves in our lower intestine and then bloating us and causing gas. When you soak beans like I have done, and I have been soaking these beans for 24 hours, a little over 24 hours, and rinse them a couple of times during the soaking process, a lot of those carbohydrates, and I don't know how to pronounce this, so I'm going to put it on the screen instead of butchering it, leach out of the beans, and as you rinse them off, and they actually dissolve in the water, and then you rinse them away. So the more you soak and the more you rinse, the less of those gas-causing enzymes and carbohydrates are in your beans. Now I wanted you to take a look at this. Do you see this foam that's on the top of my beans here? Beans contain a lot of starches, and they also contain something called saponins, and that is what this foamy stuff is on the top of it, and is actually a sign that our beans are fully hydrated, because those properties of the beans are actually being released into the water. If you do notice that your beans are starting to smell a little bit because they've been soaking for a little bit too long, the best way to avoid that happening is just through changing out your soaking water. So I have changed my soaking water out a couple of times over the last 24 hours. And that has that double duty of getting rid of some of those gas-causing enzymes, but also it stops your beans from fermenting. Sometimes if your beans have been sitting for too long in the same water, they'll start smelling off, and that is because they're starting to ferment. So rinsing is the best thing that you can do all around when it comes to beans. So that's what we're going to do now again. So like I said, I've already changed this water out a few times, and now we're going to throw it in our colander and give it a good rinse. So we'll start with our kidney beans. I have a pot of hot water here, and I just turned it on to high to bring it up to a boil, and I'm going to boil these beans for 30 minutes. So there's a few reasons why I like to do the pre-boiling method with larger beans like kidney beans. When we get to our black beans, I'll talk a little bit more about some of the alternate ways that you can can beans depending on the kind of bean you have. But for a larger bean like this, I do find that it helps to soften them and expand them even more. So even though we've been soaking these for 24 hours, they are pretty well the full size they're going to be. They can still absorb even more water. And I find that when I can beans that have not been, or larger beans like this, that haven't been pre-cooked in this way, they tend to swell up at the bottom of the jar. So the weight of them settles them down to the bottom of the jar. They swell up and then they kind of get lodged in the jar. And that's one of the reasons why I also don't like canning dried beans. So there's lots of people that like canning dried beans. It is certainly an easier, less time-consuming method than the way that I'm doing it, but I find the beans wedge themselves into the jars even more in that case because they swell entirely in the jar. So this is my preferred method for bigger beans like this. So these are what the adzuki beans look like. They kind of have a little white eye on them, and from what I understand, these are really common in Asian cooking, Korean, Chinese, and Japanese, I believe specifically, and apparently they're really delicious, and they hold up because they're quite a firm bean. They hold up really well during the canning process and kind of retain their shape and their texture, which is probably the biggest complaint I hear with home canned beans, is that they get really mushy in canning. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. It is recommended to parboil these because they're such a firm bean so that the heat can penetrate. So we are going to do that with these ones. So all this stuff, this is the stuff that we want to be cooking out of our beans before we can them. I am going to use a slightly different method for doing our black beans and the pinto beans. The reason for that is because I do find that parboiling both of these beans makes for a mushy product. The black beans, just by being soaked, are soft enough you can almost squish them with your fingers already, and the pinto beans are just a soft bean anyway. So what I am going to do with these, rather than do the parboiling method, is we are going to cook them after just soaking them. So this is what is recommended. It's not recommended to do completely dry beans that haven't been soaked first. And like I said, even if that was a tested method that was considered a safe canning method, I wouldn't do it anyway because of that wedging issue of them getting really stuck into the bottom of the jar. However, you are able to just soak them and top them with hot water and can them that way. So that is what I choose to do with softer beans like the black beans and the pinto beans. Whew, that's heavy. So shoot. Maybe I just overfilled that pot just a smidge. Look at that over there. Oh my gosh. Like I was saying, I've lost my train of thought now, but it was something along the lines of, because these beans do turn mushy in the jars, I do like to can them just with soaking them and not with parboiling them. So I'm just going to get these rinsed off. I have all my jars sitting here that I have run through my dishwasher. I'm going to be using quart jars today. Now I do prefer to can my beans in wide mouth jars rather than regular mouth jars like this. They're just easier to get out. So I am going to just pull out my wide mouth jars. I am pretty low on wide mouth jars this time of year, so I might need to use a few of the regular mouth, but I'll try to avoid it if I can. Each of my canners does 7 jars, so we're going to start with 7. Going to add a teaspoon of salt to each jar. This is not necessary, but it does make the beans taste a little bit better. You can add some Mexican seasonings or other types of seasonings into your beans if you like. I prefer to do that when I actually use them in a recipe. So we're going to fill up our jars a little over halfway with our black beans. We want to leave enough room for expansion. And we're going to top our beans with hot water. So by doing this, so we've done our rinse and our soak and our rinse and our soak. And when I take these beans out and I actually use them, I'll be rinsing them again. So they are, by the time they hit our bellies, they are pretty good as far as not making us feel gassy. We eat beans probably, I'd say at least twice a week. And we're wanting to leave about 3/4 of an inch of headspace, and then we're going to debubble. I like to use either wood or plastic for debubbling because metal can scratch the side of your jars. So using just a wooden handle works. You guys have seen me use all kinds of things, whatever I have handy. And then often after I'm done debubbling, I lose a little bit of head space. So that's our space between the top of our jar and our liquid level or our product level. So I usually need to top off the water a little bit. And I will say too that I do find that by soaking, and especially when I pre-cook them, I do end up with less siphoning on my jars than I would otherwise. Okay, I am going to lid these up, and if my lids are just coming right out of a sealed container, I am pretty comfortable just to use them without washing them, but you do whatever you feel comfortable with. If you're canning a product and that is sticky or is in some way going to get onto the rim of your jar, I do recommend washing the rims of your jars. I am not doing that because it's just the beans and the water, and I can see that I don't have any food. It doesn't hurt to run your finger around the edge of the, around the edge of your jar. That serves a couple of purposes. One, to make sure that you don't have any food on there, but also to feel if you have any cracks or anything on your jars, because that can prevent your lid from sealing. So we have these lidded up. I'm going to be putting these in my electric pressure canner over there, which I should get started. And we're going to put our rings on finger tight. And I am going to use my electric pressure canner to get this batch going since my stove is occupied with the parboiling. And my electric canner is a Presto, and it only fits 5 quarts. So something to keep in mind if you like doing larger batches. It's probably not the best option, but for convenience and how quiet it is, it's fantastic. This canner has a warming jar option. I never warm my jars, my friends. It's not a bad idea if you're putting a hot product to make sure that your jars are warm, but I usually just run mine through the dishwasher, leave them sitting in there, and that way they're not cold. But oftentimes I'll do like what I did in this case, run them through the dishwasher, which I did last night, and then have them sitting on the counter. And as long as I'm not pouring straight hot product into a cold jar, I don't usually end up with any issues. But this does have the option to warm your jars. If you like to do that, you do have to put water in them to warm them, or they float in this canner. So I put about 2 inches of water in the bottom of the canner. It says to insert jars right there, so I'm going to press the button, and then it says to warm. Now this Presto canner, and I don't know if the Nesco is like this, you can actually skip that option for warming the jars by holding the button down, the play button I guess it is, and that will move you right over to heat. So now these will start heating up. We're going to get our lid on. This does have a seal on it, and you do want to double check that your seal is actually on properly, because I have a few times I've put it on and the seal hasn't been on properly, and it tries to come up to pressure and it obviously can't without the seal. So we'll put our lid on. This little part goes down like so. Once it's hot, it's going to tell us what to do next right on the screen. So it really is so easy to use. I'm going to get the jars for my next canner ready to go because my timer is about to go off in 11 minutes. My other canners take 7, so I can do 14 more jars here, and I'm going to do all the black beans. I have a bunch more in the bowl there to rinse. Somebody in the LMR community was asking me the other day about which canner I would recommend, and hands down the All-American canner is my favorite. They are a pretty expensive upfront investment, but they are so well made. I truly believe I'll be passing my canners on to my kids and them to their kids, most likely. It's possible the gauges, we have had to replace our gauge on our canner, and I think something else, I can't remember what it was, but you can actually just get replacement parts right from right on Amazon or from All-American itself. So they are fairly easy to maintain. One of the reasons that I love them, besides how good quality they are, is that they don't require a separate seal. So you don't have to worry about that. You do need to put a little bit of olive oil around the edge of your canner, but you don't need to buy replacement seals. Unlike the Presto, the 4 jars canner, there's a couple of other canners that have the seal like this, and you do need to keep an eye on these and replace them. I'm not sure how often you need to replace them. I haven't used this canner that much, but you do have to replace them. And I like that you don't have to do that with the All-American. The Presto electric is the only electric canner I have ever tried. And I like it for how quiet it is. I've said that lots because these other canners are really loud. Once we get these canners going, I won't be able to talk to you, but they're very noisy, and those ones are super quiet. It is a put it in and forget it. You don't have to worry about weights and adjusting weights because it doesn't automatically adjust, but it is adjusted for all different elevations. So you don't have to know your elevation to use it. You don't have to adjust the weights for your elevation or anything like that, which is really nice. So I'm gonna get all of these beans jarred up. My goal here is to can enough beans that I don't need to can any until into the spring next year. I have my jars loaded up in here. I've turned it on high. I had 2 inches of water, and I added a little bit of vinegar into my water because we have hard water here and I don't want the scales on my jars. I find it's really hard to wash it off. So I like to add vinegar to it. And so now we're going to bring this up to high. Let's get the lid on. I always put these on the way that you tighten up lug nuts on a vehicle, across from each other so you get them nice and even. Now we have lots more beans to get into jars. The other reasons that we love beans around here is because they are a really affordable form of protein in comparison to, say, a steak. Not the same kind of protein, of course, but protein nonetheless. So that is just another reason why you may want to consider doing some of your, or buying some dried beans and trying your hand at canning them, or even just having them dry in your pantry and cooking them on the stovetop, or if you have an instant pot, that's a really quick way to cook them up as well. I would recommend, no matter what way you cook them though, to make sure that you soak them at least overnight and give them a couple of rinses. And it doesn't even hurt during the cooking process to do a parboil on them like this. It doesn't even hurt to do a boil on them for 30 minutes like we're doing for canning, and rinse them again and then cook them the rest of the way through in fresh water. I buy most of my beans from Horizon Distributors here in British Columbia. I'm part of a buying club that buys from them. They do distributing for a lot of the health food stores in BC. So I order most of my beans from there. So that's where most of these are from. But my kidney beans, I actually got at Costco last time we were at Costco. So you can get them all over the place. I know Azure Standard in the US, we don't have Azure here, sadly, I wish we did, also carries beans as well. I cannot wait to share something with you. So you know how we have been creating tea towels, Little Mountain Ranch style tea towels with gingerbread since the early spring. We have 2 different tea towels that we've done with them so far, and you guys have loved them. I cannot thank you enough for your support of that partnership. You guys have absolutely blown us away. So we decided to do a Christmas tea towel with a matching apron. What I love about these is they are winter themed, so they will work for Christmas for sure, because they have that kind of Christmas vibe, but they also will work for just all winter long, which was really important to me. I am going to be using them to make curtains out of, again, for my kitchen for the winter. I have my autumn ones up right now. These tea towels are inspired by 2 of my grandma's recipes. So my Grandma Maud's radio cookie recipe, which is a thumbprint style cookie, and my Grandma Pam's shortbread cookie. So it was really important to me to have both of them honored in this tea towel. So that's the cookies that are on there are both of my grandmother's recipes, which just thrills me to no end. I was doing a one-on-one call with one of the Little Mountain Ranch members a couple of days ago, and we were talking about legacy, and it occurred to me, and I don't know why this has never occurred to me before, that my grandchildren are going to have my videos, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, even potentially my great-great-grandchildren will have access to me through my YouTube videos. And I would give anything to have cooking videos from my grandmothers. I just, I don't know. I just think that is just the coolest legacy to leave them. I think that leaving them the legacy of these videos has completely changed. It's not that it's changed my motivation for sharing my videos, but it's even added something extra to them, which I love so much. Our last 2 runs of our tea towels, this was our first one that we did, and then our second one, our autumn one, is the one that's on the windows over there. These sold out incredibly fast. The first one I think was in 4 days or something like that it sold out, and then our last one sold out. We ordered more tea towels for the last one, and I think we sold that out in 5 days or something like that, really, really fast. So we have ordered even more again this time in hopes, especially because it's Christmas, in hopes that we don't end up running out too quickly, so that as many of you as possible can get them. But if you do want to get on the wait list will get 24 hours advance notice when we have the tea towels and they go live. And I'll show you once I get my samples, I'll show you the real deal. But I'll put a link for that down below so that you can get on that wait list. So hopefully you don't miss out on them, because they're so cute. I love them so much. Okay, now we can get our next canner on the stove. The nice thing about this style of canner is it is really easy to put the lid on. You don't have all of the nuts on it like you do with this canner. It's going to start steaming. So we're going to have steam come out of the top. It's going to steam for roughly around 10 minutes. It will count down the time on here, and then we will put our regulator, which is this, on to our canner where it says can, and it will tell us, it'll say put the regulator on, and we'll put it on, and then it will do its thing. I will say that this canner takes a heck of a lot longer than my stovetop canners do to both come up to temperature, to steam, to cool down. All of that takes a much longer time, so just keep that in mind if you're looking at one of these ones. It is 3 o'clock in the afternoon right now, and each one of these batches takes 90 minutes. So with these canners here, we're going to let them steam for 10 minutes, and then we're going to put our weight on, 15 pounds of pressure for my elevation. Okay, so I am going to be at this for a good long while because each of these canners, these are going to take 90 minutes. So it takes probably about 30 minutes to get them all up to pressure and have them steamed off and all of that. We do want them to steam out of their little spouts for 10 minutes before we put their weights on. And this is what the weights look like. This is the weight for the All-American canner. And this is what the weights look like for the Prestos and for the 4 jars canners. And we're going to be doing 15 pounds of pressure for my elevation. And so we'll put our weight on when it comes up to that, but it's very noisy, so I won't bother showing you that. I'm going to be canning until well after dark today. It's only 3 o'clock, but each of these canners takes a long while. It's 90 minutes of actual canning time, but probably 30 minutes of cool down time, at least 30 minutes of time to come up to pressure. So it's a long time for each one of these batches when we're cooking something like beans that has such a long processing time. So I will probably be back with you in the morning, I'm guessing, when I am finally done all this canning. So I'll see you then. All right, friends, it is actually 4 o'clock the following day. I woke up early this morning and put the last 2 batches on. I was canning until about, I think I got up at midnight to take the stuff out of the canner. You don't want to leave your stuff in your canner overnight. And the reason for that is because it can develop something called flat sour, which is where thermophilic bacteria in your canning products, they can start to develop when the temperature is held at just a perfectly warm temperature. And so it will, at least as far as I know, it won't make you sick, but it will have a sour taste to it. So it's really important that you make sure that once your canners have cooled off, you've taken them out of the canner and then let them cool the rest of the way on your counter and then get them into your pantry. Look at how dark it's getting in here already. Oh my goodness, the short days of winter are creeping up on me. I did have 1 jar not seal, and this has been one of the only jars I've had not seal all summer long, but I do find that when it comes to beans, I tend to get more lid failures than I do canning any other thing. So I just wanted to show you the difference here. These are ones that came out of the canner this morning, and you can see that they're not all white and milky. Once they have cooled down all the way, they are going to get this kind of white look. All of those starches will turn white. That is totally normal, so don't be alarmed if you notice that. One thing I did notice is that these adzuki beans don't have a lot of starch in them. So I'm curious to see if these ones will be less gas causing than some of the other beans that I have here. Altogether, I ended up with 51 jars of beans for the pantry shelves. Probably won't get us all the way through the winter, but it is definitely a good start. If you haven't had a chance to see our pantry tour video, we posted that on Friday. I'll put a link for you down below if you want to go check out everything that we canned this past summer. It was somewhere around 1,400 jars of canned goods, which feels pretty good to have that to carry us through the winter. I hope you enjoyed hanging out with me today, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.